ever noticed how some people can change the atmosphere around them without saying a single word? They do not shout or beg. They simply step back, and suddenly everything shifts.
Just get your hand and breathe. How long will I have to wait? Standing at the station gate. Broken hearted, gotta get started. Going back to Oyezu. Oh.
The energy in the room changes, and people start wondering and following them. Now, imagine if you did the same. If you stopped reacting to everything right away, if you chose silence instead of a quick response, retreat instead of anger, what do you think would happen? That is the key idea.
Hear me yelling, take me back to old Yazoo. If you don't like beans and rice, get your rice and beans.
When you stop making yourself constantly available, emotionally, physically, and mentally, you unsettle the world around you. People have gotten used to controlling you through your reactions and your need to please, but the moment you decide to move away quietly, the game changes. Those who thought they knew you discover they actually know very little about you. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves." Think about that. When you become less available, notice who. This reveals more about them than it does about you. It also shows how much you have been given without noticing. You say yes to avoid problems or keep people close, people who, in truth, may never have really cared about you. With each forced agreement, fast response, or emotional outburst, you lose a little energy. At the end of the day, you are left feeling tired, upset, or hollow because you have been too accessible to those who do not even deserve a moment of your silence. This does not mean you should ignore everyone forever. It means you should choose yourself first. Jung used the word individuation for the process of becoming whole, true, and complete. This path begins when you see that silence can be stronger than 1,000 arguments, and that stepping back, when done with awareness and not fear, can be a real show of power. Ask yourself, how long will you let other people's emotions control you? How long will you act like a puppet every time someone pokes your wounds? Perhaps it is time to cut those strings, to withdraw and become a bit mysterious. When you stop being always present, everything changes.
A child can have all of this too. Do you really see your child when you look at him? Look at David, age 9. How straight he stands.
From an early age, we are taught to answer right away, to read every message instantly, to say yes even when we mean no. We grow up thinking our worth depends on always being available. But here is a truth many never tell you. Being too available is not a virtue, it is a trap. As long as you believe you must be constantly reachable, emotionally or otherwise, others will wear you down and toss you aside the moment you stop being useful. Why? Because if you are always there, you become predictable, and predictable things are easy to use. People see you as a button they can press for attention or comfort, then ignore once they are satisfied. You may not notice this because you think that by being present for everyone, someone will do the same for you. But that is not how it works. Carl Jung talked about the persona, the social mask we wear to feel accepted and loved. This mask can force us to be too available. You say you are fine when you are not. You answer messages even when you are exhausted. You defend or explain yourself as if you owe everyone an explanation. The more you focus on other people's stages, the more you fade from your own life. Being constantly available is a subtle kind of self-betrayal. You are trying to dodge rejection and shape how others see you. But this control comes at the cost of your peace. You give away your energy as if it is endless, but it is not. The people who demand you be on call all the time do not really want you. They want what you give them, attention, a companion, or relief. Then, when you set a boundary and stop reacting, those same people might get upset and call you distant or strange. The real reason is that you are no longer doing what they want. Here is a tough truth. The more accessible you are, the less value you seem to have. When something is too easy to get, people respect it less. So think hard about who truly deserves your time, attention, and presence. Or better yet, think about who actually deserves your absence. Before you answer that, consider why we tend to give in or react so easily. What makes us keep saying yes or offering an immediate response? Carl Jung spoke of psychic energy. which is where we turn next. Your energy is all you have, and if you do not learn to guard it, others will use it for their own ends. Jung did not see the mind as a simple machine that reacts to anything without consequence. He viewed it as an energy system. Every thought, emotion, and action consumes part of that system. The question is, are you choosing where your energy goes, or is everyone else doing that for you? Each time you react instantly, rushing to defend yourself from a petty criticism, arguing just to win, or trying to please those who do not value you, you waste energy on things that do not help you grow. Jung once noted that the more you fight something, the stronger it can become in your life. If you are always drained, you are not weak, you are spending your energy in the wrong places. And when you live exhausted, you become an easy target. Manipulative people notice you cannot keep your energy safe, that you always jump to fix problems, so they use that. A healthy mind, Jung taught, conserves energy inside itself. It knows how to say no without guilt, remain silent without shame, and watch carefully before acting. Real power comes from the ability to choose how and when to act. You can only do this if you know yourself well enough to see your own triggers. Ask yourself, how many times have you lost sleep over a conversation that never got resolved? How many hours have you wasted replaying what you should have said, or wondering why someone treated you poorly? That is your energy leaking away. You are holding on to situations that should have ended long ago, keeping them alive by feeding them attention. Psychic energy is like a protective field. If you manage it well, you have presence. But if you waste it, you become invisible and unprotected. The world is not kind to those who have no boundaries. So start noticing what sets you off and makes you respond without thinking. These are the holes through which your energy escapes. Work on sealing those leaks, not to become cold, but to become more thoughtful. Know what deserves your attention and what does not. Now we reach a darker truth. A lot of our emotional reactions are programmed, and those who know this can manipulate us. They do not need to threaten or raise their voices. They only need to push certain buttons that we ourselves have left in plain sight. Jung called this projection. People often see things in others that they refuse to see in themselves, but it goes deeper. The more you're open and available, the easier it is for others to paint you as they wish. Think of the friend who only calls you when they are in crisis, the partner who expects you to save the day, or the person who praises you only when you serve their needs. They are not truly relating to you, they are relating to an idea of you, a role you unconsciously agreed to play. Why did you agree? Because you fear letting others down, fear losing them, or fear not being loved. The most powerful manipulation is often silent. It uses guilt, making you feel like you owe something. You feel the need to always help, even if it destroys you inside. But here is the big point. The manipulator does not have to fully control you. They just need you to keep reacting in the same way. When you stop reacting, the manipulation ends. When you respond with silence or walk away instead of explaining yourself, the image they had of you falls apart. They become uneasy because they can no longer predict you, and they might have to face their own faults. Not everyone is ready for that. People become nervous when you are not always around. Your silence is like a mirror, showing them their own emptiness. Many cannot handle that, so they may criticize you or stir up drama, not because you're doing something wrong, but because you stopped feeding their patterns. Jung once said, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." When you withdraw from old cycles, you force others to confront their own shadows. It is painful for them because they have always used you as an escape. But are you prepared for the backlash? Are you ready to be misunderstood, left out, or even attacked for protecting your own peace? Because once you leave the old ways behind, a deep silence follows, and in that silence, a new kind of strength can grow. Let's talk about silence as the greatest weapon. Our world is loud. Everyone wants to speak, respond fast, and prove they are right, even at the cost of peace. But there is an overlooked power, the power of silence. Not the silence of fear, but a thoughtful silence that is full of purpose. Jung saw silence as fertile ground for real change. When you stop talking, you start watching, and you begin to see old patterns, toxic games, and ways you might hurt yourself. Silence brings clarity, and clarity can be dangerous to people who rely on your confusion to control you. Have you noticed how some people freak out if you do not answer right away? It is not because they miss you. It is because your silence removes their control over the story. When you talk, you are still in their game. When you are quiet, you are rewriting the rules. That disturbs people who depend on your constant reply. True silence is not about giving up. It is about holding on to your energy. It is refusing to be pulled into battles that are not worth it. Jung said that becoming your real self means stepping away from the noise so you can hear your own inner voice. But silence has a cost. It can alienate people who liked you only because you serve their needs. It can make you look distant to those who never really saw you anyway. They may see you as too different now. This happens not because you are at fault, but because you are no longer the easy resource they once enjoyed. The truth is, the more you grow, the more careful you become with words. You learn that every sentence is an investment of energy, and not everyone deserves your energy. Sometimes silence is not surrender, it is a sign of true control. You do not need to prove anything to anyone. Your quietness says it all, and if it bothers them, it tells you they may rely on noise to avoid facing themselves. Even if you understand all this, it will not matter if you keep doing the same things, saying yes out of habit, replying to messages that upset you, or keeping empty relationships alive. Knowing the truth without acting on it is just another form of self-deception. Real change happens when you decide to be more selective with your time and energy. Being consciously unavailable does not mean being cold. It means you are not always at everyone's service. You begin by making small changes. Do not reply right away, pause and breathe before reacting. Walk away from tense discussions before they trap you. Switch off your phone and learn to say no, not today, or I'm not interested. Most important, you do not owe anyone an explanation for your silence or your absence. You owe that to no one but yourself. Yes, people who depended on your constant presence may feel betrayed. They might say you have changed, and they are right. You are protecting your energy now. Jung knew that individuation often involves being alone, but not in a sad way. It is a sacred break from the chaos, a time to hear your own voice again. Watch who disappears or who pokes you again when you become more guarded. Watch who says you changed when you finally choose yourself. None of these signs mean you're doing it wrong. They mean you are freeing yourself from traps that once held you. The strongest silence is the one that rebuilds you from within. It reconnects you to a deeper sense of self, free from the world's demands. Only in that inner space can you regain your energy and remember who you truly are. You might feel lonely or guilty at first, but this is the start of a new life, one where you do not accept emotional leftovers or empty bonds. When you no longer allow others to use you, you might see them vanish or reveal their true nature. In that empty space, a calm enters. Where anxiety once ruled, peace finds a home. Where neediness once was, a stronger self grows. This is the kind of rebirth Jung pointed to, waking up to who you really are, no longer defined by others' opinions. Yes, some people will call you selfish or distant. Let them. A little loneliness is the cost of true freedom. In that space, you are not trying to fix yourself to keep others around. You let them go if they are not truly there for you. And that is when a new kind of energy flows in, where you are no longer at the mercy of anyone's demands. This is the paradox of becoming yourself. You might be misunderstood, but you will be genuinely respected, maybe not by everyone, but by those who matter. Because when you are not there for just anyone, you become rare and precious. In a world that often demands instant replies, continuous connection, and constant emotional accessibility, there is a hidden art to strategic withdrawal, deliberate unavailability, and the nourishing silence that follows. There is a pervasive notion that to be worthy, one must always be ready to respond, to soothe, to rescue, to fill in every gap left by another person's desires or emotional needs. Yet, behind this facade of endless giving, a profound truth emerges. The more readily and indiscriminately you offer yourself, your time, energy, attention, the more the world begins to treat you as an infinite resource. You become predictable in your unwavering presence, so much so that others lose sight of the real you, seeing only the function you perform. They press invisible buttons, expecting immediate emotional compliance, because you have tacitly trained them that you will always be there, ready to fulfill expectations and needs. This does not mean that kindness or empathy are flaws, but rather that a total lack of discernment regarding your own boundaries can be costly. When you reach this threshold of constant availability, the line between compassionate presence and emotional enslavement grows hazy, and you may start to experience chronic fatigue, mental exhaustion, and a profound sense of not recognizing yourself anymore. These observations find a powerful echo in Carl Jung's extensive understanding of the psyche. His emphasis on individuation and the high value he placed on recognizing how psychic energy operates speaks directly to the struggle of over-availability. Jung believed that the human mind is not just a reactionary mechanism responding to external triggers, but also a reservoir of energy that must be managed and protected. If you are perpetually and reflexively on call to the emotional or psychological requests of others, you pour out this reservoir without restraint, running the risk of leaving yourself energetically depleted. This depletion manifests in unexplainable tiredness, restlessness, irritability, and sometimes even depression. For you are giving so much of yourself that there is scarcely anything left to serve your own growth. When you live in a state of perpetual giving, an insidious pattern sets in. Others learn they can access your time and energy anytime they please. You might begin to sense that the more you deliver, the less gratitude or reciprocation you receive. It may start as a small crack in your sense of self-worth, a creeping realization that people's demands of you are not matched by their gratitude. Over time, this crack can deepen into a chasm of self-doubt. You might question whether anyone truly sees you beyond what you do for them. The feeling of being taken for granted can simmer beneath the surface, tempting you to lash out in frustration or to suffer in silence. There is an alternative: the deliberate act of becoming less available, pulling back your immediate reactions, and finding refuge in thoughtful silence. Instead of continuing the cycle of instant replies, you step back and observe what happens when you no longer feed the dynamic with your predictable responses. Many who have taken this step describe a seismic shift in their relationship